Hello and welcome. Today's going to be a little bit of a serious Boberius episode. I know it's been a while since I actually did one of these, just kind of updates. But before I begin, I would like to say it's currently raining outside. So if you hear a loud clap of thunder, that is just my ass cheeks. And what I want to say is, I think sometimes in censoring myself, there's this feeling that the opinions of others is something that should matter, especially in a, I guess, entertainment field. And I think for myself, I want to continuously think of putting distance between myself and the way I used to be as a trans person. And I'm not sure if that, necessarily is what caused me on Memorial Day to just kind of enter into a creative funk and have trouble getting out of it. But things have been getting better, and I'm sorry, I just have to come out and say it. I want to be a comedian. Ooh, that's gross. But today's episode, I want to talk about what it means to be embarrassed and why I think you should be embarrassed and why I think that that is a good state to be in. And I think in this, I want to tell a story about the time I was in my auditioning techniques class and froze up during my monologue. Because it was weird. I could do a presentation on a topic I understand. I've stood before 300 people, and presented on policy instructions. But when I have to stand in front of someone and then show a monologue from a piece I like, and I'm not supposed to explain why I like it, you just have to kind of let the piece speak for itself. There's a very vulnerable part of you that gets shown, and it's a little bit embarrassing sometimes to feel that joy and have to present it to someone who may not understand where that joy is coming from. And it's wild because, especially in auditioning, everyone typically enjoys working for theater. That's why they work in theater. So, obviously, if I pick a play and I like it and it's a well-known monologue, there's little chance that the person behind the desk is going to see the monologue I chose and go, why did you pick that monologue? But that's something I have to deal with because of the way I look versus the way characters are often portrayed and represented. And I think that's something that I kind of want to get into, is that representation of people doesn't have to be as monolithic as the ideals we build in our mind. And I think a lot of times when we stand against those ideals, it leads to a feeling of embarrassment because you know that when you stand against them, you're going to be outnumbered. You're going to face sort of a degree of resistance to the ideas you're presenting. But it's wild to deprive oneself of the enjoyment of getting to perform based on that sort of fear that the judgment that'll be passed for the performance will somehow reflect poorly on you as an individual. And again, I came out a lot later in my life. I came out at, I think, 27. So many moons had passed, and I had gone through quite the bit of socialization and learned how to, quote unquote, be a man. And with that comes this sort of notion that you have to be this responsible, productive member of society. There is no higher state of being than the wiping of sweat off of one's brow after a hard day's labor, and I think a lot of that measuring one's worth in the output one produces that is sort of common in the way we raise young boys is we lose that the only reason there's value on our output is because we choose to create it. We lose the acknowledgement of our own agency, and we, I guess, when that output becomes limited, we stop understanding our worth as individuals because that concept isn't really well reinforced relative to the value our output brings. And that might be a whole lot of, I don't know, complicated nothing. But when it comes to doing things we enjoy doing, to censor ourselves based on our understanding of the world because of our experience is foolish because we haven't yet experienced enough of the world to truly have enough background information to draw those inferences. I spoke about abstractions the other day, and that's kind of what I'm getting into, is the ideas that we have of what social norms are entirely fictitious, and each of us have our own creations of these ideas. But there's, again, moments where people will devalue the existence of others and call them things like NPCs. And to be honest, in several times in my life, I've seen myself as an NPC. I'm the shopkeeper. I'm the lady who roller skates around the fire department. It's not bad to sort of want to be out of your mind for a little bit, or, play imagination, as it were. You don't have to confine yourself to the material reality to live in a world of dreams. And I think when we sort of feel those dreams and those desires pulling us, and we don't indulge them, that's when we start to feel trapped in these, bonds. And I think on this channel, I had mentioned my own embarrassment about comedy I had done 13 years ago is when I did comedy. And the thing about it is that mentioning that embarrassment made it incredibly difficult after I went to open mic and felt that joy again in my life to go, oh goodness, I actually do enjoy comedy. But there's a separation between stand-up and YouTube that, I would like to acknowledge here and now because I love justifying my art. There is nothing better than getting to go, everyone see how smart I am? You see that joke I just made? Sorry. But being embarrassed isn't as bad a state as the sort of fear of embarrassment. And when I say we should be embarrassed, I don't mean go out and embarrass yourself or make a fool of yourself, but don't let that fear of embarrassment be what stops you from doing something, because oftentimes the greatest joys are deprived of ourselves because we don't give ourselves the opportunity to actually try something that we might enjoy. And I don't know. Maybe it's all coming off preachy. I don't even know how to make YouTube videos anymore. I've been struggling on Dark Souls. I know I said, oh, we're gonna knock out the 3 lords. Nito has been knocking me out quite a bit. And it's embarrassing to have spent over 6 months playing Dark Souls for you. But had I not started playing Dark Souls, I wouldn't have gotten to embarrass myself by sort of sharing my story and having my experiences invalidated by people on the internet. But as someone with a degradation kink, had I never had those experiences, I never would have had the great joy of sticking around long enough to make videos that ultimately wind up reaching people like you who are here to support me and who understand the representation I'm trying to provide and appreciate me for that. Because I'm not saying that I am the experience of every trans person, but how often when we look at people in public, does it matter what their gender is outside of the context of a sort of gender bias of, oh, I would like to feel sexually attracted to someone, or oh, I would like to reproduce with someone, or there are so many things that come with those connotations that when you look at interactions that are generally neutral, where gender is not important, it's interesting sometimes. Anyway, that's just something I've been considering because it's silly often how resistant people are to the idea that, like, I look the way I do and I identify the way I do, when the reality is that's just the way my body looks. You know, it's people say you can go and do surgery, or you can do the voice training to make your voice sound a certain way. But when we do those things, all we are making is concessions to the very social constructs that our existence is in direct opposition to. We're capitulating to a higher power that has no power because we resisted it when we declared that our identity is separate. And I know it sounds as if that's like, oh, we declared it, but identity is an immutable aspect of our sort of central self. So when you consider that indelible piece of us, that like aspect is always there, and then we come out at different times, I think had I not been okay with being embarrassed, I probably would still be in the closet. And that would be absolutely miserable. Because being embarrassed is what allows us to grow from the sheltered life under those constructs to the joys of getting to go up on stage and embarrass ourselves, or getting to start up a camera and embarrass ourselves on the internet. It's so much about what makes life worth living, because it breaks the monotony of the standard work day. Oh geez, sorry, I'm not supposed to talk about work on here. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I think this is just a little bit on embarrassment. I think we should all aim to be more embarrassed, or look for the parts of our lives that we hold ourselves back from because of our embarrassment, and then engage with it. Because what's the worst thing that happens? You make something bad. Well, you know what's worse than making something bad? Not making anything at all. Anyway, I appreciate your support. I'm Sticky Basket, and I will see you in the next one. Love you. Bye.